Hello, everyone. Welcome back to our Friday meeting. My name is Michael Teresi. Let's get right into this. If you have not already, please sign in to our sign-in form to help us track attendance. Um, we also do this with like Zoom. If you're signed into that with your Knight's email, this is an alternative way. Both are very useful. This is helpful for checking attendance and officer eligibility and voting eligibility. Eligibility for when that time comes in like a month. So if you're interested in doing that, be sure to have your attendance tracked properly. We do have a few links though. If you're not familiar, if you're new here, if it's your first meeting, please feel free to visit these after the meeting. Our mailing list on our website, you can sign up with your email and you can get our weekly emails for any workshops and Friday meetings that we have going on that week. That's once a week. We don't spam you, so don't worry about that. Our shop is where you can get some of our apparel, our club t-shirts that we designed last semester are available now on our online store. Our Discord is our main communication platform. We do send all of our announcements through Discord, so that is the one platform which you get everything. So if you're not in there, please do so at your convenience. We have all of our members there. We can communicate, ask questions, and help you out with anything for the club. And Twitter, of course, we tweet stuff. We tweet about our workshops and our Friday meetings on there as well. Feel free to follow that on our social medias. So today's topics, we're going to go over some announcements. Then I'm going to pass it off to Jeffrey for our current events. And then the main talk today is going to be student-led by us. It's going to be a what is a SOC, basically, by myself and variable name Daniel with us. Ryan, unfortunately, is at work today. He's caught up in the office, so he can't make it with us today. But we'll still cover the entire content of the slides. And then after that, we'll move into closing. Oh, is he here?
Yes.
Okay. So the operations team, we do have the operations team meet every Tuesdays at 8 p.m. If you are interested in helping us run the club and helping us plan workshops and helping us design these talks that you're about to see today, it's open to anyone. You can do that at, again, Tuesday at 8 p.m. on Zoom, online, because, COVID and all that, but we know that by now. We post this in our Discord and our calendar, as well as in our web courses. If you're a dues paying member, you do have access to our web courses, which you can get the events for the club alongside your other classes. But that's not required to get any additional course content. It's open to anyone. You don't have to be a specific type of member or dues paying member, but we would like you to pay dues, however. You do get some nice benefits with that, such as the web courses. But ops, really great in helping us run the club. So the announcements today, we're going to just mention again our t-shirts that were designed last semester. Then we're now going to remind you all about National Cyber League, which is a CTF coming up, and our workshop happening tomorrow on offensive security. So if you have noticed and you're wondering why I look so good today, it's because I do have the Hack UCF hoodie now that just got delivered very recently. So if you are one of the people that ordered a hoodie, check your mailbox, check your doorstep, wherever you get your mail. You may have already received it and not noticed, or it may be coming out in the next few days. I believe the shipment just started. If you did get a hoodie and you did not get a tracking number, please feel free to hit me up in the Discord and we can pull that tracking number for you if you somehow don't have that information on hand. And that hoodie, though, is over. So unfortunately, it was limited edition and now it's being shipped out. However, what's not limited edition is our t-shirts. These are available on our store all the time. And if you are a dues paying member, you do get a $10 discount towards one of these shirts you see here. The winning design was the virtual campus, as you see in the center. And the other ones are also available on store. And again, the $10 discount applies to all of them, but just one. If you are not a dues paying member, that's all right. You can still buy the shirt, but at a slightly higher price, or base price rather, for that. So the National Cyber League, the registration is now open. That link, which hopefully we can get posted in chat, is for our coach code, which affiliates you with the club and with UCF. So we can have some of that representation going on if you decide to compete in this. The registration is $35. And we did have a lot of people compete in this last fall, and they really enjoyed it. And the turnout was so great that National Cyber League is actually doing another one this spring. They don't normally do 2 in a year, but this time is different. They're going through with it. Those are the dates for the individual games and the team games. If you feel like you want to compete in that, then feel free to check that out. We also have more information in the Discord, and we can post that later if you have any questions. On top of this, any additional CTFs, we don't have any strictly being advertised right now, but you can always practice for CTFs, such as National Cyber League, at ctf.hackerchef.org. That is a CTF dashboard that we have hosting ourselves online all the time. We can try a Jeopardy-style CTF challenge, no stakes, no competition, no teams. That's, of course, online for all of our members and accessible on the internet. No like infrastructure access or anything like that, available for everyone. If you're interested in actual CTF competitions and more team games, please do visit ctftime.org for more information. That's where we feed all of our information, and you can browse the entire repository of all kinds of competitions. So, kind of related, the Offensive Security Workshop is happening tomorrow. Tomorrow at noon, that is Saturday. Join Reaper tomorrow for offensive security. She's going to cover some of the techniques, tools, and methods that you can employ on a security engagement, do's and don'ts. There is a business side of pen testing, so you'll also be covering that aspect as well. Real life engagement. She does have some professional experience in the field, so there's some background there that will hopefully be shared amongst the people that do attend. So if you're interested in going into a field of penetration testing or red teaming, or you just want to learn more about it, please feel free to attend the workshop tomorrow, Saturday at noon. That link for that was in our weekly newsletter, which was sent out probably Wednesday, and it will be posted tomorrow morning in our Discord. So if you're not in the Discord, be sure to get there. That will get you the information to you the quickest. So with that, I'm going to pass it off to Jeffrey now for current events.
Okay, thank you. Next slide. So first, hackers using Google scripts to create e-credit card skimmers. These scripts were deployed targeting mostly online stores, and since most sites just trust like any JavaScript from Google without really asking questions, the skimmers were just added without being detected. The data itself was being forwarded to an Israeli-based server, and this was discovered by security researcher Eric Brandl. Next slide. Now, Kia Motors. So they suffered a ransomware attack. Fun. The ransom was posted for about 400 bitcoins or 20 million US dollars. There was an IT outage lasting several days after the attack, preventing people from even buying cars. And the note, which you can see on screen, references Hyundai, but they haven't said anything about being attacked, nor do they think they were attacked. Looking at the ransomware, no, you could find some goodies like a Tor address and just other typical ransomware funsies like please don't restore from backup. Next slide. And finally, everyone loves SolarWinds, right? So hackers actually was able to get some Azure and Microsoft Exchange source code from their snooping. So the hackers were able to find the repository keys and secrets to actually access the source code repositories. Microsoft said that no secrets were stored in the code and that nothing from production was stolen, which is a bit of a like sigh of relief, but well, some of the source code got leaked, so that's no good. So yeah, that's pretty much the basics for this week's current events. Now I'm gonna just pass it over and let's get started.
All right, thank you, Jeffrey. Current events was a bit brief today. So hopefully Ryan is here, so I'm not sure if he can do the slides. That's not sure, but we do need to make Daniel co-host so we can unmute and stuff like that. So hopefully Ryan is at the workstation to do that. Technical difficulties, please hold. All right. We're going to go ahead and fun. All right. Things are cool to go. Sorry about that. Ryan, are you going to do slides today? No. Okay. Cool. So we'll go ahead and with myself and Daniel as planned. So sorry about that. The main talk today, what is a SOC? It's going to be myself and variable name. Unfortunately, Ryan's stuck at work today, working hard, so he can't do some slides today.
Sad days.
Very sad. So before we get started, we're going to go ahead and kick it off with introductions. So here is me, first of all. If you haven't got on, I am the president of Hack UCF, as always. Some information about me. My professional experience has been around network architecture and automation. Some languages I do are speak English, obviously. Programmatically, I do a lot of PowerShell, and recently a lot of YAML. A lot of automation toolkits are written in that, so fun stuff. My work experience has been recently at IBM and previously at Glisec. In those places, I did cybersecurity work. I was an intern at IBM for a while. I did systems automation at IBM and a bit of that at Glisec as well. More architect and administrative side from there. My links up top, you can see my Discord, my LinkedIn, and my GitHub. There's some cool stuff on that GitHub. Some of it's cool, some of it's really lame, like a one-line script that I made and put it there for some reason. Obviously at UCF, studying IT. I'm currently a senior. And I also went to Orange Technical College a few years back for computer systems and IT, fun stuff like that. My minor is in secure computing and networks. And some of the hobbies, my main hobby, deleting emails because I get too many of them. I don't like emails. So that's a little bit about me. With that, we'll pass it off to Daniel for his slide.
Hey all, I am Daniel, otherwise known as variable name. You can see my LinkedIn and Twitter there at the top. I'm currently employed at a company called Glisec. There I am a SOC analyst intern. I work primarily with Splunk, but also with a few other tools, namely Cynet, Nessus, and Simulate. There are some others there, but those are like the primary ones that I focus mostly on. I'm currently wrapping up a bachelor's in computer science here at UCF course. I'm also getting my minor in, well, I'm getting my scan minor. Things I do for fun basically are Hack UCF, which is like 90% of my fun stuff, and a little bit of graphic design, mostly for Hack UCF, and when I can get around to it, cooking. My most used language is English. I know several others. Mathematical notation is probably like my most actively used written language, and C is what I prefer to write things in. That's good enough for me. Michael, if you want to continue on.
Okay. So I think Daniel will take it away in the beginning for the first few slides.
Awesome. So SOC, like those things I have on my feet, not exactly. SOC stands for Security Operations Center. And what it is the central point in any organization for log analysis and incidents response. Additionally, it's typically where forensics begins. Now, to kind of like give a little bit more detail on that, you can have a security operations center for a single company, or you can have a security operations center for a multitude of companies. But when you have a security operations center that focuses on providing services for a bunch of other companies, you have what's known as an MSSP, or a managed security service provider. That is where my experience is. The company I work for does security for a wide range of companies. In a SOC, the biggest limitation is what it is that you can see, right? If I have access to data, then I can parse that data, I can make sense of it. It doesn't matter how well outfitted a SOC is, or how many tools I have available, or how much experience I have. If I can't see it, I can't act on it. 9 times out of 10, whenever I am being frustrated on an investigation, or I'm having difficulty accomplishing a goal, it's because the thing that I need to find just doesn't exist, or it does exist and it just didn't get logged. In a lot of ways too, you can have data that is available, you just can't get to it. And we're going to cover some tools a little bit later on in the slides, but what you refer to data like that is, it is called dark data. It exists in the environment. It's parsable. It's there. You just would never find it because you don't know that it exists. And some of the best security tools for SOCs, but also for like all other kinds of analysis, help to reveal that data and help to put it in context with other things that make it more relevant. At the bottom of the screen here, you'll see an image of a flow diagram. And this is kind of illustrates what exactly it is, not this specific case. This is kind of like a rarefied instance, but this is the kind of thing that you try to focus on as a SOC analyst, right? This covers the cash flow from a scam from the 2020 Twitter Bitcoin hack. And what you have on the far left of the screen are the wallet payees, right? These are all the people that got duped into falling for the scam. And what you have is every single one of those would be enumerated, right? And if we were looking at this in a purely text-based form, then it would be almost nonsense, right? You just would have a bunch of hexadecimal addresses, or not hexadecimal, base 64 addresses that you wouldn't be able to make sense of because they're just essentially like intentionally gibberish. In the next step of the diagram, you see that this orange line, right? And that's the scam wallet. This section of the diagram is important because it shows every single address that leads to this one address. Now, in this visual representation, that's not particularly important because what you're not seeing is all of the additional information that you would have to filter out, such as every other wallet that was interacting at the same time, but did not target the scam wallet. And this is where visual representation of data is kind of important. What you can do is drill down the most relevant information in an easily understandable format. You see everything is flowing from the left to the right. And as we continue on, we see a multitude of different places where which this scam wallet connected to other wallets or other endpoints and passed money back and forth. Well, yes, in this diagram, they were passing money back and forth. And what you can see is the majority of it all flowed from the scam wallet to additional wallets, but several of them went through different locations to clean or to obfuscate all this, the transactions. If you look on the far right side, you'll see the majority of it was a direct transfer, but the bit at the top, all of that is what you would consider, in this case, dark data. It would have been buried in all of the different transactions that you would not have had time to parse through and go down and recognize. When you have powerful data aggregation tools, you can do all of that in an automated fashion so that you have a little bit of input, but the majority of all the computation is happening behind the scenes. Michael, if you'd like to continue on. So can have SOC. So we talked about like, what is it, right? But like, why though? Visibility is critical to good security, right? If you can see all, you can know all, right? SOC analysts work together to find the signal hidden in noise. What that means is as a SOC analyst, you're going to be presented with a massive amount of data, right? And literally like data. You need to make it into information. You need to find a way to pull out all the things that are important and relevant. And you need to be able to like compare and contrast all those different data points to provide actionable information, right? More often than not, your job ends when you're passing this off to the next person in line, whether that's if you're working on an internal SOC, that would be passing it on to your next higher up, right? Your manager. Or if you're a little bit higher up in that chain, you would be passing that off directly to like a C level, right? Where you're saying that, hey, we have this information and we are having these problems and we can remediate those by doing X, Y, and Z. I have like formulated a report and here are my recommendations for us to do this. When working from the standpoint of an MSSP, like I do, when we have issues, we can't directly resolve them. It's our job to manage the security services and to do all of the investigation. The end of my job is when I pass over a a recommendation list of ways to solve problems that exist in someone else's network. Then there's negotiations back and forth on how exactly it is that that can be done, both to get the best amount of security as well as to cost the client the least amount of money and also the least amount of work on their end. They may implement some of it, they may implement all of it, they may implement none of it. It's not my job to like determine for them what they're going to do, but what they can do. I hope that provides enough of context for like that little bit there. Things that you can do from a SOC, right, is monitor system resource usage. And that could be important for a variety of reasons. Perhaps there is a worm that is crawling across a client's network, and it is just soaking up resources left and right. And they can't track it down. They don't know exactly what's going on, or maybe they do. They just can't contain it to a specific network. From a SOC, you would be able to have like a bird's eye view of the entire system, and you would be able to either deploy mitigations yourself or make recommendations to quarantine certain sections of their network for later remediation. User logs are a fantastic example, I think, as Michael's going to talk about a little bit later on, in that if you can detect and log when someone attempts to log into a network or an endpoint and they fail to do so, you can capture a surprising amount of relevant data, namely where it is that they're connecting from, if they are connecting like over the internet through an internal network somewhere, or if they're like directly at host. That provides you a high level of information. You can determine like what usernames and password combinations are being used. Maybe this is Jerry from accounting who just forgot his password again, no big deal. Or it might be super elite hacker number 6 hitting from somewhere in Russia, and they're trying to brute force admin credentials. You don't exactly know unless you have the information to look at and make that determination. A SOC and like a properly set up SOC will allow you to do that with ease, where you don't have to worry about trying to get that information. The information is already there at your fingertips. You just have to decide to look at it. Network traffic statistics are another great example too, particularly when you're looking at things like DNS protections, or you're looking, or sorry, not DNS, behavioral DOS protections, right? You might not always have just a plain brute force DDoS, right? Sometimes you have a little bit more like efficient solutions, or some like more sly attempts. Maybe you have a bunch of network accesses that are just continuing to run up like throughput to max it out, or perhaps it's trying to perhaps you can look at network flow and determine that network traffic is increasing and it's network traffic that isn't desirable, so that you can make a recommendation to a client to say, perhaps you want to change your firewall policies here. We've noticed that we're getting a lot of traffic from this specific subnet. And while it's not always good policy to do a blanket ban, perhaps it might be a good idea to just do a temporary ban for 30 to 90 days, and we'll come back to it. You get very little traffic from that section of the internet anyway, so you're less likely to have a problem if that's the best solution. Or even going even further than that, you can make a whole host solution and just say, I recommend that you look at purchasing this product. It does X, Y, and Z. It is capable of doing all of your behavioral DOS mitigations, all of your anti-scanning mitigations. You don't have to set firewall policies. It is built in such a way that it automatically detects traffic that should not be coming into your system and sets up like mitigations automatically for you. There's a whole bunch of different outcomes that can occur. But if you can't see the data and you can't understand the data, then it's ultimately irrelevant. You want to keep in mind the CIA triad. So confidentiality, availability, and integrity when you are looking at a potential like remediation, right? Confidentiality is great, but if no one can access the data, then it doesn't really matter how confidential it is, right? Additionally, if you are providing confidentiality and availability, but the data can't be trusted, then ultimately why would you want that data anyway? These are all balancing factors, and there are a number of like mitigations that are great solutions, but they don't allow you to maintain CIA. So you have to find ways to either like remediate those mitigations, or you just have to find a better solution. And we can talk about that a little bit later on. The best way that I found to try to drill this idea down, right? If you've never worked in a SOC, or you don't really like have a lot of experience configuring networks and defending networks and or even attacking networks, is imagine if you are put in charge of defending a castle, right? So you got a castle, it's medieval times, and all of the security measures that you have at your disposal are these castle defenses, right? Without a SOC and analysts for your SOC, you've got all these defenses, but no one to work them. Your firewalls sit unconfigured. Your denial of service mitigations are not correctly installed in your network, and they are not functioning at all. Even the best machine learning based, like we like talk about like XDR solutions, they don't do anything if you don't have people that can use those tools. So you've got like this great defense in depth strategy, but no one's operating it. And that doesn't stop anyone from just basically bypassing all of those things. Next slide. Cool. Michael, when did you want to jump in? Did you want to take a couple of these?
I can take like I think next one.
Okay, cool. Then I'll finish up on this one. So the day-to-day activities in SOC. These things are going to range quite a bit on what it is that you do in a SOC. Not every SOC is unique, I guess is the best way to say that. What it is that you focus on is going to be built to the needs of your company and or the clients that your company serves. There's a good chance that you're going to be monitoring a system for alerts, but whether or not you are the one that is helping build out tooling for that system, or you're just using that tool, there are a whole bunch of different like moving parts that exist therein. You want to have a monitoring system because it does for you what it is that you can't do, which is be everywhere at once. You can set agents at different endpoints in your network that scan for network traffic moving across them, or for direct access to those endpoints. You can set agents that monitor at the exterior on the perimeter of your network, and they are going to monitor just the traffic coming in and the traffic going out. Depending upon the configuration of your network, maybe your company doesn't operate with any actual hardware on-prem. Maybe the majority of everything that you've got is configured in the cloud, and you're just essentially like all of your endpoints are routing through to a gateway and going directly to the cloud. So you have a lot of tools that are very specific for a cloud-based environment versus an on-prem environment, or it could be the exact opposite. Maybe you don't do any cloud-based things. Maybe you've got multiple air-gapped systems that exist inside of a larger network, and you have to be able to monitor all of those individually, as well as monitor your interconnected network that dials out to like the internet. You are going to spend the majority of your time doing research. It is the most important thing you can do. Once again, getting back to what it is we talked about before, or what I've talked about before, you can have all the information in the world, but if you don't have access to it, or you can't make use of it, then it might as well not exist. So like when SolarWinds dropped, I remember I was working, and that popped up on our radar, and I got a chance to start like reading through, running through like all of the reports on it when it first came out. And as time went on, you kind of got to watch the process evolve and like learned more about what was going on, and it was fantastic. And you just kind of like realize again that moment, it's like, okay, cool, this thing happened to this really, really big security provider and a bunch of like other like huge, very, very, very well invested clients. How exactly would we handle this, right, if we were hit? And like, luckily, we weren't exactly on the radar for that kind of a thing, so we didn't have to really be that concerned about it. But another example is, and this one is actually something that like we have, it's a little bit closer to home, I guess, is everyone may have heard about the hacker that got into the Florida water treatment plant recently and was able essentially to leverage an attack that would have hurt and or killed many, many people due to changing the balance of the acid that was added to the waterways. Now, luckily, that was managed by an individual that was like on site at the time. They just happened to be watching the gauges and caught that and was able to shut the system down. But as a security provider, you kind of look at that situation like, okay, well, how would we go about providing protections for a situation like that? And like the naive solution would be to say like, oh, you just drop XY tool on it and like you let it do the work. But the more that you read into the situation and you get to know the details, you realize that this hacker was able to piggyback on an individual who's an authorized user and essentially like existed inside a verified session, so that like there was no real way to detect them from like just from like a network traffic standpoint, right? This isn't necessarily like an automated IT solution. This is something that's a little bit newer that we've had some problems with, like that have been evolving for a while now and are starting to become like more popular. But you look at the situation, you're like, okay, cool. What tools could I have deployed, or what would I, as an analyst, have to have done in that situation to have caught like this situation as it was occurring? And you just like you recognize that there are some solutions, but realistically, without a heavy development to mitigate exactly that one problem, this is something that would have flown under the radar. It's not surprising that this was only caught by someone that was like on premise at the time and was actively doing their job and watching for these things. But you know, you always have to be trying to be one step ahead. And when you're not, you have to take the time to sit there and learn. Oh yeah, and we can't gloss over the business related tasks because fun fact, it's not always about being the most technically skilled person in the room. Being technical is important, and knowing how to do your job is incredibly important, and being proficient at your tasks is incredibly important. But at the end of the day, as a SOC analyst and in many other places in related fields, you're not reporting to someone who's technically minded. You're not talking to someone who knows these systems just as well as you do or better, because that would be simple. That would be an easy conversation to have. Instead, you have to go talk to the business owners. You have to talk to the people who don't know half of what's going on technically. These people might be incredibly intelligent in their fields. They might be very technically savvy in what it is that they know, but they probably don't know a quarter as much security as you do, or they're not as well versed in like what's currently going on. Maybe they did the job that you did, but they did it 10 or 20 years ago, and the majority of their information is woefully out of date. You have to be able to relate the information from all of your research and from all of your planned mitigations to them in such a way that it makes sense for them. More importantly, you have to realize that just because a secure solution or the solution that you've discovered or that you've engineered is the appropriate solution, that doesn't mean that it's the appropriate solution for this person. Maybe their business can't afford your $100,000 like tooling. Maybe the business can, but the process is an 18-month process where they've got all the money in the world, but you now have to add it to the planned budget. They have to go through all the budgetary meetings. It's got to get pitched to the person 5 levels up. They've got to approve it. It's got to come all the way back down and get signed. And then they've got to put in the purchase order and actually go through the entire process of like obtaining the tooling and the hardware. And then they've got to go through implementation. It's not just as simple as saying, oh, I found the solution. It's, oh, I found the solution, and here's a way that you can understand what needs to be done. And that is a whole skill set in itself. And you will most certainly be writing documentation and reports all the time. And you need to be really good at writing. Finally, making quality use of the data collected. There is certainly like there's a huge boon to an individual who can look at a whole bunch of seemingly disconnected things and find the connections between them. If you are a big fan of pattern recognition, right? If you like doing crossword puzzles or putting jigsaw puzzles together, you like doing CTFs, you like being put into an environment where you aren't always going to know the answer, or more often than not, you have to engineer a solution that might not exist before, or you're adapting a known good solution to fit for exactly the situation that you're in. If these are the kinds of things that you're passionate about, if these are the kinds of things that make you want to go to work every day, then exploring working in a SOC is definitely something that you should consider, because that is what you will be doing every single day at work. More importantly, your ability to predict future events accurately is incredibly important. As I've kind of said like several times, and I've like alluded to it, the field is always changing, right? You can study everything all day long and you can learn something, but it's only like good for the moment that you have learned it in there. Moving forward, the next version of that software, of that malicious software that comes out, or this specific type of attack that comes out, it's going to be a little bit different. The moment that someone finds a solution to defeat an attack is when the attacker goes back and makes a new attack, right? It's a constant game of cat and mouse going back and forth. And for some people, that is exhilarating. That's a lot of fun. And for some people, that's exhausting and they just can't keep up. So knowing yourself is probably one of the most important things going into starting in this field. Michael, you can go ahead and take it from here.
All right. So in lieu of Ryan, who's still at work, I'm going to do some of his slides today. But he did contribute a lot to the slides, so let's not let that contribution go unrecognized. So next slide. Let me, there we go. So as Daniel said, in order to basically act on all of this information, you need to see it all. And once you see everything, you're going to basically see a lot of things. There's going to be a lot of noise there. And the challenge then comes into how do you see all of this data? And there's tools for that, which we'll show later and get more into that very soon. But once you've collected all the data, you need an easy way to monitor all that. Different data from different data sources can come in all differently. They're all standard protocols like syslog. Windows Events Viewer has its own protocol for everything. But the end game is to get all of this information throughout your entire corporate environment from all different types of devices. How do you visualize that in a meaningful way? So this is log standard. It's very easy to know where information is coming from. Information contained in that can be metadata, such as machines, what user, what IP address sent this information. And all of that can be visualized in your SIEM of choice, or elk stack, depending on which route you go, but we won't get too much into that. It's important to find that data and categorize it. It's great to have all the data, and you want all that data, because if you collect too little data, then you can't properly perform an investigation. The last thing you want to report to your boss or to your manager or however your structure operates is you find out of a breach, and then you have to go back and figure out how that happened and how to prevent that. And it's not going to be a fun day for you if you have to report to your manager, yeah, they got in, we don't know what they took, and we don't know how they got in, and we don't know how to stop them from coming back. Even worse of a scenario is you don't even know you were breached because of the lack of log collection or too little logs. Going back, or you don't want to find out you were breached before someone else does, or after someone else does. If your website gets defaced, if information gets posted on the darknet or online, you definitely want to catch that before it happened, or rather you want to prevent that from happening in the first place. So you collect more data, but the more data you collect, the more difficult it is to manage. Large data sets take up a lot of physical disk space. Now we're getting into hardware requirements and software stacks. all of that data needs to be stored somewhere for X amount of time, depending on certain like HIPAA regulations or industry, U.S. government policies. There are some laws around how much data you need to retain for X amount of years or months or something crazy like that. I know medical industry, I think there's a standard for like 10 years of data log retention for some HIPAA stuff, which is crazy. And holding all that data, it costs money. You need hardware to store all that, and you need a way to search that. So it's not as simple as on Linux reading var log and keeping that for 10 years, because that's going to be an abomination to manage in the future and at scale. You can't go to each machine and find all the logs there. So once you have at scale, you then have multiple machines working together for the company. So you can get logs on one service and across multiple different services, and you don't want to go to each host. So you need to find a way to aggregate all of that data and search it as a complete unit, but also have the verbosity to be able to dive down into each machine individually and tie that down. Why it's important to aggregate all of that data is because you want to find patterns and you want to find similarities across data. And the most useful thing you can do with all that data is establish baselines. So if you have 100 servers in your environment, you run a website with a big cluster, all of these servers, you want to know basically across all of these servers, what's the average load, what's the average use cases. If you see suspicious activity on one server, you can adjust that one server. If you see suspicious activity on all of the servers, you can begin to see the bigger picture here. You can even begin to see things before they happen. You can see a path of attack as certain exploits take place. So for example, if one person were to gain access to a service by brute forcing the information and then pivot to the database, the more you're logging, and as you become versed with all of the log aggregation, you can begin to map out from one server, you see brute force attempts, and that's weird. On another server, you see database access. Okay, that's weird. But if you're able to collect all of that data and then from a single platform see it all together, you can then see it within a time frame and then map it across time and both physical space. So you can see brute force attempts here, database access here, user being created over here. All of those things are not super important on their own, but put together, you can begin to map out a general idea. And what I'm floating around the idea of without explicitly saying it is a platform such as Splunk. This is a enterprise tool that's very, very good at logging and indexing massive amounts of data. I'm talking terabytes of data a day and storing all of that in a very efficient manner. So Splunk, if you're not familiar, as the definition here, it's a software product that analyzes and visualizes and searches all of your logs throughout your entire IT infrastructure. It can take in data from all different kinds of sources, like websites, applications. It has its own built-in sensors, data sources, all crazy kinds of stuff. You can read files, databases, just about anything. And you can stream that into a indexing platform or cluster if you need to operate at a certain scale, and parse individual events and then visualize them together. So with Splunk, you can collect things such as network logs, which are your PCAPs or network captures. You can see network traffic. You can collect things from firewalls and see what protocols are being used if you're doing DPI or deep packet inspection, finding out what's actually being sent over the wire. Server logs for system uptime, performance statistics, so CPU stats, hard drive usage. You can see when a hard drive is failing on one server by monitoring the smart status, the disk checks that the servers do every now and again. EDR, which is a endpoint detection software that gets installed on multiple machines and logs all of the details on that, and it's a bit more advanced than a simple log aggregation. And what Splunk allows you to do is basically take all of that data, put it in a single pane of glass or search cluster, they call them, and be able to search all of the data in your environment at once, very easily, correlate them, and do all amazing things. So that's why it's very important to be able to have a tool such as Splunk. It's not the only one, but today we'll cover Splunk to visualize all that data. You can see all, you can know all, but can you actually act on it? Can you actually recognize what you're looking at? And that comes with experience, and that comes with correlations and things of that nature. So one cool thing I'll show you in Splunk on the next slide is they're pretty graphs. Now, that's not very impressive, but there'll be a demo of that to hopefully hype this up more than what I can now. So Splunk has the ability to visualize data in a way that you simply cannot do by logs alone. So what the visualization of the data does is it makes it very easy for us humans to see data in a meaningful way. You can present different information to actually see what the data looks like. So what we are looking at here is an actual real data that I've collected on my home server, which is next to me, of a honeypot that I created. And we can see here different pie charts based on different regions. So what that is access attempts to my honeypot from these different regions across the globe. And the bigger the pie chart, that is representative of the quantity of attacks coming from that. So we can see most of the attacks are coming from Eastern China. There's a few attacks coming from Central America, a few in Brazil, a few in North America, and so on. And these logs are not present in the logs alone. So this is something that Splunk does to enhance the logs. With the logs that I've collected, I'm only collecting the connection information and the IP address in which it's coming from. So what Splunk allows us to do is correlate that data across public sources as well. So what I have my Splunk server currently configured to do is take those IP addresses and run basically a whois lookup or reverse DNS lookup and find out, here's an IP address. Where is it physically located though? That's not something present in my server, and that's something I can get if I was not using Splunk or if I was not using a central log platform. So I can now enhance my data and find out, okay, I'm being attacked. On top of that, I can now find geographical locations and see, okay, if most of my attacks are coming from this one location, that may indicate it's a targeted attack. Now it's no longer a network scan, it's a specific adversary is trying to get into my server. And it's the same IP address and the same location across time. So that's how you can begin to analyze persistency, perhaps APTs if you're a high target asset. You can see different regions light up more than others. If it's spread across the board evenly, you can determine it's mostly benign traffic and a lot of noise exists. So these are not all hackers living in these cities and towns on the globe. A lot of these are simply just scanners on the internet, and there's plenty of, and we'll actually look more into those scanners very soon. So a lot of these services are also good services. There are some public services such as Shodan, or I believe Scan 8 or Scan 9, or one of them. Basically public scanners that audit the entire internet and have, it's basically the Google of networking. So like Shodan by name is, you can see IP addresses and ports open. It's basically running Nmap across the entire internet, and you can just browse that. Perfectly legal, I suppose, but you can just browse all the public services. But of course, accessing those and try to exploit them, illegal. You know, yeah, some areas here. So what I'm going to do now is actually show you the Splunk deployment that I have set up, and we're going to walk through that kind of in lieu of that tool time.
Hey,
We'll jump into
Michael,
that.
before we get to the demo section, do you want to take a minute and just kind of like ask for questions and kind of like cover everything that we talked about?
Yeah, of course. I was actually just gonna get to that as I saw the question slide pop up.
Sorry.
But yeah, you're cool. Thanks for the reminder. So before we go into a more advanced dive into Splunk specifically, does anyone have any questions for myself or Daniel on the topics that we've previously mentioned in the aforementioned slides? I guess not. That's cool.
I mean,
So
that just means that we're really good at conveying information, I guess.
oh yes, absolutely. All right, so I'm gonna exit out of this and then move into my Splunk. So you also be able to see this just fine if I'm not mistaken. Yes. All I did was switch tabs.
Yep, looks good to me.
Cool, cool. So what we're looking at here is Splunk, right? Nothing pretty here because I'm not doing anything. What Splunk allows me to do is collect things into indexes. So indexes are common pools of data that are very common. So things such as Windows Server logs or Linux server logs or web logs, things like that of that nature that you search commonly, you want to categorize into indexes. And I'll show you a few of them that I have configured. I don't think anything special. It's a small deployment that I have set up in my home lab. So a lot of these come with Splunk, just default stuff. But it's more for search efficiency to index these properly. As I mentioned, indexing them correctly makes things very easy to parse and search and get a real picture of that. So I can search all of Windows servers at once. I do have a Windows server index that's collecting logs from my one Windows server. That's very noisy though. Windows likes to spit out a ton of logs. We'll look later into my honeypot index, which is right here. Latest event was 11 hours ago, so that's pretty surprising. It seems that there's no attacks happening right now. I'll dig into that and show you some cool graphs and plot lines onto what that looks like. So that's that. Yeah, there is no dark mode on Splunk, unfortunately. They just love burning your eyes because as a SOC analyst, what you do is look at a bunch of logs, which is looking at the computer screen all day. So the bright minds over at Splunk thought, let's make it as bright as possible. So you're staring at the screen all day for 8 hours full time, you go blind. That's what the idea was behind that. At least I think it was. I mean, I don't see why else you would use light mode on this, honestly. I don't have the plugin to make my browser dark mode. Got blinded by the logs, yeah. That's what I want to be. I'm lost in the logs, you're drowning in them. So I'll pull up raw logs so you can see what it looks like at the smallest unit. Keep you awake. Yeah, that's what it does. So I want to specify a search query. I specify that by searching index, right? Because those are the indexes I have. So in my index, I want to search my, let's say Windows, no, we'll do the honeypot instead. I don't know what's in Windows Server. So we'll do honeypot, which is the honeypot that I've collected. So as we see here, these are broken down into events. We can see timestamps here for each event, and it's all written in JSON. So that's just basically a way of storing data. So each of these events is a single log entry that's being forwarded to my Splunk server from my other server. It doesn't matter how it's being generated or how it's being sent. It all looks the same in Splunk regardless of how it's being done. We can see the host it came from, which is my Docker host, the source type, the source, the two sources actually, and the source type is just an HTTP event. So I'm collecting data over HTTP. So that's like another way you can send data. So as we can see here, this honeypot I've created is for SSH. Now, if you don't know what SSH is, it's basically like a remote terminal session. So if you want to interact with a terminal on another machine remotely across the internet or across your local network, you use SSH, which takes a username and a password or a public key. However, this is not a standard SSH server. If you're familiar with that, and those keen-eyed have noticed already, I'm logging passwords. So this is a special implementation of an SSH server that I've deployed on mine and exposed it to the entire internet. And what I'm tracking is usernames being attempted. I'm tracking where they're coming from, their IP address, and the password that they're trying to brute force with, which is very interesting. So with this data, just for fun, well, not like practical security, but it is fun to look at and very knowledgeable, we can see patterns and common word lists being attempted. If there is a known exploit for a particular service and you're monitoring this data, you may see recurring names appear. And we can look at that once we get to visualize the data and analyze patterns across a lot of time. We can tell Splunk to say, hey, give us the most common username being tried. Give us the least common password. With that, you can't search that normally with just logs. A tool like Splunk allows you to make context of the data and correlate it with each other. So I can find out if I was so talented with the Splunk, which I would like to pretend to be, I can find the most common username by region. So I can find some perhaps cultural differences there and find out what areas of the world are trying the more common passwords. Perhaps attackers in Southern America are trying things in Spanish or a Latin language. Other areas would be different. So all that looks cool. And now we'll look into basically the dashboard that I've created to visualize all of this data. And of course, feel free to ask any questions about what you're seeing here. I know some stuff you may see. So what we're seeing here is the logs collected. It stopped collecting logs at, let's see, 8 a.m., I believe. Right. The hackers stopped going, apparently. So we can see that we do index honeypot, which is saying get all the logs. I want to find only failed login attempts. And I'll do a time chart which is basically charting the time. And I'll say count, if I remember how to do this on the fly, if I can spell time chart correctly. We're gonna do live analysis of data because that never fails. I do have to change the format to doing something wrong. There's a visualization. There we go. Format, that works too. Now this is basically a chart of all the attacks happening. Let me change this span here to say 30 minutes, and I'm going to do all time. This server was set up Tuesday night, and over the course of that time, we have almost over 9,000 events. If I change this, however, no, almost. See how close. We have 8,900 events. Hopefully the hackers pick up now and we can see that number rise. But we can see here a track of data of when my server is being attacked. So we can see the first spike actually happened around 2:30 a.m. And went down to 5 a.m. So that's hacker hours right there. That's when the first peak of the data occurred. We can see those waves and peaks. I'm not sure exactly what causes this data. You can see over time, there are definitely trends. I would expect the server to be hit all the time constantly, but that's simply not the case. So there are scanners that are running regularly. And what this also means is that I'm not actively under attack, which is a good thing. It's not a constant stream of data. So we see basically waveforms go up and down, pretty regular patterns. For some reason, at around yesterday at 7:30 a.m., there was a constant stream of attacks against my server and hovered around 80, 90 attacks constantly. So I'm not sure what that's about, but that seems to be probably a new attacker running my scans in a different way that the previous ones have. So with all that, we're gonna, instead of looking at like lines and statistics, I know y'all love stats, we'll move to a pretty dashboard that I've created to represent this data in a more meaningful way. Yeah, Splunk is very much stat friendly. You can do things like calculate sigmas and automatically find outliers and stuff like that. So in my dashboard, I'm searching based on the last 15 minutes of data. Unfortunately, there's nothing here. On some days, I can find like 60 attacks in the last 15 minutes. I would have liked to see live data so we can say during the time of this meeting, we're actually being hacked and watch them come in, but that's not the case. Is there anything in the last hour is the question? No. So let's just do last 24 hours. There should be some attackers once a day. Okay, so in the last 24 hours, I was reached over 4,000 times. In the last all time, that was almost 9,000. So what's that? 40 to 50% of the attacks over the course of Tuesday night, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. So over the course of like 4 days, almost half the attacks happened within 24 hours of now. So I guess the hackers are ramping up for the weekend. Who knows? But the longer you calculate this data, it may normalize over time. So I'll go back to 24 hours to make it simple. So what we see up top is basically a visualization of the data that we're seeing. The total login attempts is simply a statistical count of all the data. We can see the common usernames that they're trying across all sources. So we can see the most common username they're attempting is root, which is 67% of the time. And of course, all the other ones. If you are a system administrator or deal with a lot of that, you may see some familiar names, such as MikroTik. That is a Cisco device for networking equipment. I believe only wireless access points. So what this means is that if you have a Cisco device being connected to the internet with SSH exposed for some reason, there are people actively trying to hack into those specific types of equipment. So the threat is real, as long as you're not using one of the easy passwords that we can see on the right side, but we'll get to that. Here we can see sources that are coming from. Almost, I don't have to guess, it's a number right there. 37% of them are coming from this one IP address in the last 24 hours. The other 25% is this other IP address. And those IP addresses look very similar. They are, in fact, just a few digits off. So they probably are owned by the same entity. So what this means is that there's this entity attacking my server in mass in the last 24 hours. Everyone else is around the same, so it's just generic scans across the internet. So that's pretty important there. Right, it's likely the same ISP. So there's probably the same region as well. We can even see the logs down here to where exactly that region is. So what you normally won't get from logs, because it's bad security practice and there should be no reason to log passwords in plain text, I've forgot all that and my special SSH server is logging the passwords you try. So if your SSH server is using any of the passwords, and if they are, please stop. Your password should not be 123, 1234, or 1235, or any of that matter. Test, password, admin. These aren't fun passwords. There's a lot more fun ones, as you can see. But what you can probably do in a more advanced honeypot, if I had more time, is you can then begin to, just for complete fun and to see the actual malware out there, if you're so inclined to set up an SSH server that accepts these usernames and accepts these passwords, you can then begin to log the actual commands being run. So you can log and see the actual attack chain of a hacker as they're going through it. Obviously, letting the attacker run commands on your machine, not the best idea. But if you can isolate it in such a way, we can just watch what they're doing and they can't do anything. That would probably be a lot of fun results to look at to see what the heck people out there are doing and what exactly a hacker looks like. So on this table, I've basically summarized it all into a table to show the most recent events. So we can see the last event was at 7:50 of today. So that's probably in UTC, unless they're hacking me from the future, which would be impressive. So if that's UTC, I subtract 5, that puts us at 2 p.m. Yes, 2:50 p.m. So at 2:50 p.m., I'm being hit very quickly, within milliseconds of each other, by that one IP address in Shanghai, in China. They're trying the username root and all of those passwords there. And if we go through, we can see another one on third page. We see from Vietnam, we're being attacked by this IP address using these passwords. So a username like Cisco or Camera or Steve or POS or library. So I don't know what these passwords are or these usernames are, but it's just interesting to see that these are actually being used somewhere. Otherwise, they would not be in a list, right? So I'm not sure if I can find any fun ones, but this one's UBNT. If you use Ubiquiti equipment, these are logs of Unify Ubiquiti networking equipment, much like Microtech. They're trying to access your networking equipment, which is no good. I'm looking at chat. I don't think we did a workshop on honeypots, no, but if there's interest, we can do something more fun on that if there's a demand for that. Daniel's provided me a search to run to help find some fun stuff. We'll try that after the next map. So here's the sources I showed. Most of the attacks coming from maybe that Shanghai area. And of course, it wouldn't be a fancy dashboard without the obligatory missile map. So we can see all the fancy attackers coming in with arrows to my location in Orlando. It's not processing it very well because I believe it's trying to process, if I'm not mistaken, the complete 4,000 arrows, which is not easy to process, but it's definitely there. So with all those logs, we can begin to get a bigger picture of what's actually happening on the network. I'll run the search that Daniel provided, and then we'll open it to any questions if there's anything like that. So yes, this is a fun experiment for home labs. There's no harm in exposing my server to the internet in a honeypot fashion. I've isolated it accordingly and made sure they're taking the proper precautions. So this is something you can set up in your own home lab. Splunk Enterprise does cost a ton of money. However, there is a free version where you are limited to 500 megabytes a day, and I'm going nowhere near that. So if you want to set this up, it's actually pretty easy to do in your home lab, and you just want to collect logs and you're interested in cyber defense and cybersecurity and how people analyze logs at scale and do security at scale. Splunk's a good place to start. It's also excellent to put on your resume. If you want to work in a SOC or in a security center, having that industry experience of Splunk or something like Splunk is going to put you to the top of the list. It's a very useful skill to have. I'm sorry. So we'll do this, the honeypot search, and I believe what it's going to do is reference, let's do a copy paste. That looks useful. So, it's doing a IP location based on source. All right. So what I believe what this is doing is just basically showing the same table I've created, or trying to count the passwords of common. So, yeah. Instead, I can do table username password. No. I don't know the Splunk. I'm no expert. I never claimed to be an expert at Splunk, but it's super cool. Obviously, I'm doing it live, so completely forgot how this works. I don't know. You sending me searches, but I think we all get the picture of that. Yeah, it's fine. Is there any questions about what we're looking at here or event stats? Oh goodness, I don't know if that's any questions about what we're looking at here or anything cool things that we see. I would show all the passwords because there are some fun ones in there, but I don't want to search it live because there are some pretty nasty swear words in there people try, and I'm not interested in showing that to all of y'all and to YouTube because that's going to be difficult to edit out later. But people do try all fancy passwords and usernames. So, fun fact.
Sorry about that Splunk search. I realized the count was not configured correctly. Like right as you hit enter, I'm like, oh no.
Yeah. All right.
Did anybody have questions?
Anything on Splunk?
Bowled over. Everyone just loves data science.
That's true. If you love data science, you can get like a Sigma, calculate outliers. I won't do that because I don't know how. But you can. You can even do like predictive analysis. So I will try that and utterly fail, but I'll do it anyway. So if I say index equals honeypot, I'll say failed search, failed logins. That's the keyword in my searches, and I'll say time chart of count span. I'll say 1 hour span, and the search is pretty quick actually. I'll say all time, visualize that data. Here it is. We can do I believe, predict. So Splunk can do like machine learning a little bit, some algorithms. It is predict. And I want to say future time span. I'll say 24 hours because 24 units of span 1 hour. That should be 1 day if I know my numbers, and it fails. I don't know what I'm doing. Oh, predict future. I have to give it a field to count. So I want to predict the count in the future of 24. Totally haven't done this before. There we go. So we can begin to see basically a pattern of estimates here. Now, if you do data science and you're like, fancy CS major, and pretend to be better, you can see things like low 95% or stats or math. You can do low 95% predictions, basically saying the degree of accuracy in which the prediction is made. So by looking at all the data all the time, you can see the green is a predictive count of what my expected attacks are going to look like. So we can see that it's slowly on the increase. On the blue is the actual count. The green is my predicted. So in this entire range, Splunk predicts that my count will be slowly increasing. And you can see a pattern begin to form with these spikes based on the previous spikes we see here. So Splunk estimates that around 10 a.m. today, I think my time was in UTC by mistake, but that's weird. Anyway, like in 24 hours, they expect me to have 300 attacks, basically slowly increasing. So we begin patterns with this, using, of course, math and further fine tuning. You can then begin to find patterns in your data and predict something before it happens. If you see an increase in attacks or an increase in anomalous activity, using predict functions, using our human brains that like the machine simply can't understand on its own because it doesn't have contextual information, we can begin to see an attack forming before it does. Initial access and an attacker feeling around the network and trying to pivot, we can see that early on and predict saying, okay, this is like suspicious activity, and it seems to be increasing over time. So they're trying new things. If it's going to be a real issue, we'll see a significant spike in the near future. And obviously you want to prevent that. This is just log analysis. So it's not actually going to take action on these. You can make some automated alerts trigger you, like send an email or do webhooks to alert you of things happening. So if the Splunk server predicts that I'm going to go above 300 attacks in the next 24 hours, send me an email and let me know, and I'll prepare myself. So all kinds of stuff like that is capable with Splunk and log analysis. So it's pretty neat stuff if you really want to get into it and begin collecting data and like just looking at pretty charts all day. And that's your thing. SOC analyst, probably your thing. If you're interested in like just looking at all this stuff and finding the bad guys and you really like to dig into those details, this may be for you and something you want to consider pursuing. It's very easy to set up in a home lab. It's free. It's a Docker image even. And we have some details on Docker in previous videos, but it's very easy to deploy. You can do so in a couple minutes if you know Docker.
So to also give a little bit of a different like outlook on Splunk as a whole, like what Michael has shown so far is like absolutely like fantastic for base Splunk level, but this is what is known as like Splunk Enterprise. Layered on top of Splunk is they have Splunk Security Essentials, which is a free app that you can use that gives you access to a little bit of user behavior analysis, as well as some other like fun tools. It's pretty basic, but it does exist. At the enterprise level, there is Splunk Enterprise Solutions, and that is a whole additional set of algorithms and like machine learning, like pre-built nets that will ingest so much data and provide you a unique outlook that your typical analyst or your like typical team of analysts are going to miss entirely. There's also Phantom, which is another set of specific tooling for Splunk. So it's very extensible. You might work in an environment that uses some or all or none of these features. And even if you aren't working in security, Splunk is a fantastic platform for all kinds of data analytics. And the more often that you use Splunk and you look at like the different graphs that it puts out and the charts that it makes, you start recognizing like when other people are using Splunk, but they're not saying that they are. Like there are plenty of times where I walk across like a website and I'm like, oh, well, somebody's gathering statistics with Splunk. Or when you see like someone has like slightly modified a Splunk graphic to use like just a little bit different tooling, it's like, oh, okay, I see what's going on here.
There's a complete web API you can use for this. If you are a web dev, you can make your own dashboards basically in fancy CSS and HTML and just pull the raw Splunk data if you really want to go like enterprise level. Someone asked how intense this is to run in their home lab. Can you run it on a Pi? You can run Docker on a Pi, so you can probably run this on a Pi. The only difference I don't know is x86 versus ARM, but maybe, probably, I'll say. The base specs for Splunk are ridiculous and completely leashing. The base specs for Splunk estimate 16 CPUs and 64 gigs of RAM, I believe, which is absurd. And I don't even have. It's my home lab. It's fine. Those cores and the resources come from the amount of logs you're going to be ingesting and the amount of ridiculous searches you're going to be using. On a Pi, if you're just collecting like a few logs and doing basic searches that I have here, it should run Phi on a very little machine. So the specs definitely, it's very lightweight. It's like 300 megabytes of an install. It's very small. The processing comes into play when you're doing crazy searches. If you're doing like predictive analysis against machine learning and like blockchain, cloud, quantum computing, you want all the cores you can get. But making a pretty line go burr, the little machine that I have does this just fine.
There's also like the whole notion that like Splunk Enterprise is intended to do things like I've got a million events. Exactly. Yeah. I've got a million events hitting like this one section of my network per day. And I need to look at the last week and see what the trend is. Or I need to see like who the top 5 people like accessing in this way are. Or I need to know who is taking up the majority of like my traffic throughput. And you're crunching like millions of logs. In which case, like even with the base implementation, without like efficiencies added in, you're looking at a search that might take an hour and a half, 2 hours to complete, maybe longer. So on a Pi, for your home lab stuff, probably not going to be an issue unless you're trying to look back at like what happened over the last year, in which case, put a fan on it and go get a fire extinguisher and hope it doesn't light itself on fire.
Unless you're logging Windows. My Windows server logged is not even fully being logged. One Windows server, if you enable all the log options, you can probably take a few gigabytes per day for one Windows server. In an enterprise where you may have 1,000 workstations across your environment, each setting their maximum logs are a few gigabytes per day. That's going to be, let's say, like 3 gigabytes per day for the 1,000 machines. In the industry, we call that a big number. That's the technical term. But that's going to be a lot of data being parsed. That's like terabytes a day. Of course, a Pi won't work. A single server won't work no matter how big it is. You'll need multiple servers in a cluster computing environment to run this thing if you're collecting that massive amount of data.
And how much exactly does 3 gigabytes of data on a Splunk enterprise license cost per year?
When you go to the website to view pricing, they suggest you call them for a quote. So that's your answer.
To add a little bit of context to that, it's about like $1,300 just for like the initial license. Like for a year isn't like, I guess, that bad if you're actually gonna like use Splunk to make money, but it's really expensive, and it gets like really way expensive really quick.
Right. It's almost interesting position to be in when you're operating at a certain scale, when you know that the computer you're working on makes more money than you do.
Jim G, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, asks, is that per seat or per org?
So the way Splunk indexing licensing works is based on the indexing alone. That's the main method of doing so. So if no matter how many people you have, no matter how many nodes are in your clustered environment, it all shares the same license. And that's based on the amount of logs you ingest per day. So if I ingest 100 gigabytes per day, you can buy like a 150 gigabyte per day license. And it's coded based on ingesting data. Because of course it is like security focused. If you go above that, they don't stop you from ingesting logs because that's like a bad idea and like is very like bad for them to prevent you from basically logging security events. If you exceed your license quota, you just can't search the data, but it still collects the data until you increase your license, then you can search it. But the licensing is going to be per basically deployment. So no matter how big or how small your deployment is, you need to pay for how much data you're ingesting. That's the only thing you have.
And just to kind of round that answer out a little bit, in addition, Splunk does have a cloud computing model where they essentially like provide all of the equipment for you and the instance for you. And instead of paying on ingestion, you pay on computation, which means that you can theoretically ingest an infinite number of logs. But every single time you would run a search, depending upon how much like computation that uses, that's what you're going to get charged on. And for some people, that works better. Like Michael was like suggesting, if you have 1,000 Windows 10 like endpoints and you need to monitor all of the user traffic, right? It might be insane for you to try and like ingest that much data every single day, but maybe you need to ingest all of that data and you only need to run a search on it like once every 6 hours. So you are paying per search, and that was still going to cost a lot of money, but it's probably a lot less than ingesting like 2 or 3 terabytes of data per day.
Right. You'll need a pretty big pipe too to push that all over the internet.
Right.
Yeah. So, yeah. But of course, the pricing hopefully isn't a concern for you if you're deploying this in a home lab. Again, the 500 megabytes per day, so half a gig per day, is free to use. The free version lacks a few features that you'll probably never use. In a home lab, it's probably fine to not use authentication because in the free version, you're not allowed to use usernames and passwords. When you log into the Splunk website, it just like, or the web interface, it just logs you in as admin. There is no username, password, there are no credentials. But that's fine if it's just me alone with my home lab. So no hackers here, unless it's me, then I'm the hacker.
You already got root.
Yeah. I'll set it to the free license. Are you on the free license or are you in the free trial? Because I've done that too, but then after like 30 days it expires and it gets very angry. Yeah. If you didn't explicitly specify the free version, it automatically puts you on the free trial. And after 30 days, things get complicated because then you're like, hey, I have permissions as admin. Then it's like locks you out as admin and you can't get in. It's like, it's a mess. So yeah. All right. So I think with that, we'll move back to the this one. Present. Any final questions as we close this out? I know we've
Questions
answered quite a
about
few.
the industry, about SOCs, about security tooling. Anybody have anything they
Socks.
want to know?
I got 2 socks, wear them all the time. Keeps my feet warm. Are there any alternatives to Splunk? Yes, there is. One of them that I'm aware of is Graylog. I know someone else who uses that. They say it's pretty nice. It's similar to Splunk and is getting, I think, some traction in the industry. It is an open source alternative. So with that, it's also going to be free. So I've not used it personally. I've only seen it and heard of things about that, but it is a free alternative. As I mentioned, Logstash and Kibana is another open source, I believe, free alternative. I've tried setting it up. I find it more complicated. And while I'm not prepared to explain the difference, that's considered an elk stack, where Splunk is a seam. Those are two fancy words. If you know what they mean, congratulations. If you don't, I wish I could explain them. But they function very similar.
Yeah, I've also heard really good things about the Logstash. I'm not very familiar at all with Kibana.
Right. I've tried installing Kibana once. It threw a bunch of errors at me and failed to install, so I gave up. Went back to Splunk because Splunk works. Splunk is superior. Splunk is green.
I mean, I will say like Splunk is fantastic when it's doing exactly like what it's purpose built to do, which is like make pretty charts and like represent data visually. When you try to make Splunk do something that it is not engineered to do, and you don't have an app to extend it to do that,
So in regex.
Yeah.
For that honeypot, it was basically being logged to a single line. So that's when like logging formats come into play. The name, when you really think about like how computers read text as strings, the log that I was seeing was attempted username blank username from blank the IP address using password the password. From a computational standpoint and a log aggregation standpoint, how do I exactly know like which text field is the username and password and the IP address? Some logs will use like JSON or key store values. So if you ever seen them like YAML, it will basically say username equals this, password equals this. So Splunk knows, okay, username equals this because it's so in the logs. In that one, I had to create custom regex, which was pretty spicy, to basically extract, if you see these words surrounding with these characters, then like extract the username password. It was kind of disgusting. And the fun bit was I spent time trying to make that work with spaces. Because I couldn't just say, fourth word is username, because what if the username has a space in it? So yeah, of course, no one used spaces in the usernames. So that was a waste of my time, but I still learned, which is the good part. All right.
All right. Well, I guess there are not any more questions.
All right. All right. If there's no more questions in the next like 12 seconds, like 8 seconds, I'll move on to the closing slide, and then we'll give you the sneak peek of next week because I think it's pretty fun.
While we wait for that one brave soul to pen out their question, I just want to go ahead and put out there that if anyone is interested in moving into the space of working in a SOC or is interested in getting started in walking down that path, you can feel free to reach out to us at any time on the Discord. We gave you our contact info at the beginning of this, so please feel free. We happen to know plenty of people in industry, so we can point you in the right direction. If we don't have the answer to something, we know someone that does. And more importantly, my company is always looking for talent. So if you are that motivated, feel free to reach out.
We do have a jobs channel in the Discord as well. So I'll plug it again. If you're not in the Discord, we have plenty of resources there. So in the jobs channel, we have people who work in the industry who often have their company hiring. They may post links sometimes in there. If you're looking for employment and would like to obtain money to exchange for goods and services, you can apply for some of the people there. Maybe some of the people there can even offer a reference for being part of the club. So that's one of those cool things of being part of a cyber club at UCF. We can provide those resources from people in the industry and who have the jobs that you want. So that's a good channel as well to discuss job opportunities if you're interested in that. All right. I think it's been several seconds and no one's had a question. So I think everyone completely understood exactly what we said and is ready to become a SOC analyst and install Splunk in their whole lab tonight. All right. So thank you all for showing up to this week's meeting. Yep. We will see you next Friday. Same time, of course. Next week, by popular request, we're going to dive into a bit more hacking in Red Team. I hope that sounds fun. So we're going to do a live retired Hack the Box. I'll be doing a live Hack the Box next week. We all get to watch me smash my head against my desk to do that live. And you will basically see how red teaming works, the process of going through a box. You can see a totally legitimate hacker such as myself, how we go about learning that. If that sounds fun and you want to basically say, well, how do I do that sooner than next week? We do have that workshop tomorrow at noon with Reaper, who does red teaming professionally. And hopefully she can share some more insight than what I can with my hack the box skills. So we will see you tomorrow at noon if you enjoy the red teaming workshop. If not, hopefully we'll see you next Friday for our deep dive into hack the box hacking live.
Hey, Michael,
So-
before you sign off, we got a question in the comments.
So any update when more Sunshine CTF will be on our CTF site? I don't think that's actively being updated, unfortunately. That's Kevin in Discord. We have a CTF channel. If you want to ask questions about like the CTF and stuff like that, someone will point someone in the right direction to ask those questions to the people who actually update the site. I don't directly manage the CTF site, but we can in the Discord. We can definitely get in contact if it does. All right. So with that, we will see you all tomorrow or next Friday, or ops on Tuesdays if you really like this and want to do workshops and help us run the club and be part of our super cool ops team. We will see we'll have that message posted Tuesday. That's 8 p.m. Tuesday night. So yep, if you want to be super cool, help us join ops. So with that, I'll send y'all and let you go. Prepare for your tests, do all that fun stuff, school. Yeah, so thank you all for showing up and listening to our talk. So see ya eventually, right? Real soon. So have a good one.